Oh yes, and welcome back to another Marvel Contest of Champions news. This one's a very special one. This one's going to focus on all the updates that have been big and impacted on the community to a degree where we've all had to talk about this. Whether or not it's been Alliance Wars or Mystic Dispersion, we're going to talk about all the main stories. And you might be wondering why my voice is like this. Well, my balls have dropped and now I'm an adult. No, I've had a sore throat and I'm still determined to kind of carry on regardless. And don't worry, next couple of days you'll be back to the old shrill and whiny British voice that you've all come to know and love. Let's jump into the video. The year started off strongly, seeing content from Thor Ragnarok entering into the game. We also had elements of strength from 6-star champions, meaning that the contest was going to dramatically change to refer to these champions being the big strong champions for the future. With stuff like uncollected difficulty, it was no surprise that we were going to see these enter into Kabam's main focus for difficulty and content going through the year. And it would be a completely bad show for me not to mention the fact that we had the release of Black Panther in cinemas and also a Trials event to follow. This type of dynamic of the Trials based event has been replicated throughout the year, as well as stuff that we're likely to see in 2019. January also saw two champions being massively improved in the shape and form of Red Hulk as well as Luke Cage. These champions before the community wouldn't even bother with, but now they are strong contenders to be firm favourites for people to use, and it is no surprise that they are some really go-to champions as 5 stars and 6 stars. Especially if you're new to the game and looking for a decent 4 stars, these two science champions are perfect to pick up. Kabam have slowly started rolling out an improvement-based scheme, but it would be nice for this to be ramped up, especially with other times in the year that other champions have seen a look in. In early February, some of the community that were with the T-Mobile cellular network found a massive load of downtime, and this was dramatically affected in a lot of different countries, with some taking at least half a month to the entirety month without playing the game. So if you were affected, man, I do feel sorry for you. Kabam did end up sorting this out, but it was a case that it was very disappointing to see. From late January going into early February, a lot of the community who were on T-Mobile networks found that they weren't able to access the game. Some spending at least 15 to 20 days without the game. And for a lot of people that really enjoy the game and like to grind it out, they would have felt really upset by this. In late February going into March, it saw lots of smaller improvements to bugs, which not a lot of the community were too happy about. Especially because Drax, who had been a very go-to champion that was able to bypass things like Astral Evade, was being hit by Astral Evade, and this was an ongoing scheme. Also, there was a little bit of laziness from the developer putting in MODOK's lab for a second time, very close gap between the last time, which was December. And this probably was due to the fact of putting in something so substantial with Infinity Wars. In March, Kabam put Chaos Rifts back into the game. They were like Dimension Rifts, but they were just rebranded. Also, Kabam had a really big dilemma on their hands, and they had to sort out the fact that they had entered in Sentry, and he wasn't to the player base's liking. The backlash was so bad they had to change the character and improve him, but unfortunately it really didn't make the expectations of the player base. It's only been in the last couple of months with the addition of the champion as well as Aegon that a synergy has made him a lot stronger and much more of an interesting champion, but a standalone champion with great power he is not. Version 18.0 was pretty darn major for the community if we're considering the addition of things like Dungeons, our first iteration of Dungeons, as well as a second season of learning the lessons of Alliance Wars. This was pretty darn big. This also saw something come back to the game which I really like, and that's like a shop-based thing where you can go in and purchase things like Awakening Gem Crystals, Tier 4 Basics, the list goes on. And it was called Infinity Dust. Similar to things in the past like Valor, and also we had things like Scrapyard and a currency for that. This was a bit different, but the same type of thing. I really hope that this returns back in 2019, but also we saw things like Vanquishing Blows return, and this was the way that we kind of gain more of the currency. In the months leading up to the update in May, we found that the game was not functioning correctly. We were having connection issues, login issues. There were definite problems with the release of the first part of Dungeons and the first iteration of Dungeons. And it's only been in the last couple of months that the game has had some sort of consistency. But either way, when we found that the dungeons were re-rolling in, so they were going into a new time slot, the first 24 hours were terrible, the next 24 hours were terrible. And every point, it was usually for me about 8 PM GMT time, the game would go down every time the dungeons were reset. In May, we got the news that Quake fans were not wanting to hear, though it didn't make a significant difference, and that is that the way that people were using Quake said that, well, basically she's an exploit. Whether or not the community were for this or against this, I had no real big issue with this. Kabam felt this was an exploit and decided to change the way that she functions, but not dramatically to a point that everyone said, right, well, she's an unusable champion. She's still to this day a fantastic champion. In late May, going into early June of 2018, we saw things about GDPR come up. And what is GDPR? Not a lot of people still know to this day, but in short, it's the way that data is handled, your personal data. And obviously Kabam had to make light of this because there was the issues with the game going out in EU and having to adhere to EU legislation. And also we saw improvements to something that was a real nuisance, and that is when you evade back and go into a block, you were then hit, which is unbelievable. You should be able to evade back, go into a block and find the enemy hits your block, so you can then change the way that you're playing, whether or not you intercept or be more aggressive, or then parry or hit out from that. It's still nice to be able to play the game properly. So this was improved. During the early summer, we saw issues as well to things like the way the auto block works out, and as well the way the Archangel works, and that's something to do with debuffs that, well, it opened up a big can of worms for the way that people play against stun immune champions, and whether or not that's an exploit or not. There was also issues with, after finishing an SP3 in a block, that champions would become unresponsive. And obviously we can't all really remember those days, but they were frustrating for some players. In June and July of this year, we saw improvements to the way that peak milestones and milestones in general are looked at. And the fact is, this then reflected Alliance Quest as well as standard 3-day events for alliances. Things that to this day seem a big improvement. There's been additions of further base rewards, which are nice to have and also work together as a team for. In late July, early August, we saw Gwenpool at the Movies, a really fun event where the entire player base were able to get their hands on some amazing rewards, which was met with real positivity from people. It felt that this was a real community event where a lot of people, to nearly every single person that participated in it, were able to get a 5-star featured crystal. Unfortunately, the rewards and what most commonly people got were Iron Patriot. It did mean that the community were invested in this lovely little event. We also saw Red Skull come into the game, which was kind of cool, and loads of bug fixes, but at the same time it was the second edition and second try for Infinity Dungeons, which was a lot better. It wasn't perfect, but it was a lot better than the first one with all the login and connection issues. Also, Kabam really had to do something about this evading away from multi-hit attack, which really did affect a lot of players, especially when it comes to things like Alliance Wars, which was seen to be a very competitive thing within the game. In late August going into September of 2018, we saw Uncanny Danger Rooms enter into the game. These were things similar to like MODOK Labs in that, MODOK Labs evolves constantly, and this type of thing was similar to the Trials based events. It was a shmush of both. So it was nice to see something different going into the game. But the only difference, this had champion requirements, something that is coming into the game quite a lot more than normal and shapes and forms the game going into 2019 also. We also saw Season 5 of Alliance Quest come into the game, improvements to the Glory Store, which was much needed. As well, you can buy things that are better for your Glory-based purchase, with averaging a good chunk of Glory each time you complete a week's worth of Alliance Quest. It was good to see us being able to get things like Tier 2 Alpha fragments more quickly, and also we've got things like Tier 4 Basics we can get more of and more quickly. Same thing with Tier 1 Alpha and lots of other different stuff to boot. In September of 2018, this was something that I picked up and talked about in Marvel Contest of Champions news, and largely it's gone unnoticed and did at the time go unnoticed, because right after it followed a big ban wave. Kabam was saying that they were on the backs of people's heels when it comes to breaking terms of service, and the fact that, you know, logging into multiple accounts is now a big thing, a big hot topic in the game. And when it comes to you using a mate's account, that was seen as a break of terms of service and affected people for Alliance War seasons. It all goes back to the very beginning of the first Alliance War season, and where people were able to jump into each other's accounts and move people throughout the battlefield. So if there's a brilliant player in the game, they were able to take on that person's account and move them about. And you know, it wouldn't be a case of the individual's ability, it would be all about who was the best player in the game, moving those people through. This was a big issue at the top and also filtered its way down to the bottom, with a lot of people feeling really frustrated with people winning and breaking terms of service at the same time, and people openly talking about that. There was also different things with Alliance War seasons with placements, people placing 2-star champions, hopping to different alliances, you name it. People were trying to get that strategic edge, and each month there's something new that people are talking about, having off seasons, you know, sabotaging their pre-season in order to kind of make big jumps. There's loads of different things going on at the moment, but Kabam seemed to be back in September on the case of people. October saw some great improvements to that month, some additions of things like the symbiote, which everyone named Lil Steve. This was a great time for the game and for a great month of hype. Right at the start of the month, we had New York Comic Con, and the champion as well as Aegon were then teased for the game, as well as big things to come in 2019. And it's still my theory and belief, when they said we need a bigger booth and we need to go bigger, that we will indeed see Galactus. This was something at the time, with the acquisition of rights of releasing things like the Fantastic Four stuff, that we wouldn't see that whatsoever. But as we know, with December's tease of 4th year and 4, and it being about Fantastic Four, and seeing Silver Surfer, it made me really unhappy, and I think it made a lot of you happy as well, that we may be seeing Fantastic Four in 2019. But October was not just about all these new things that are changing, it's also about making the old new as well. And Carnage and Venom, two fantastic champions, but Venom seemed to get the better of the improvements, and is a champion that I'd love to get in future at 5-star and make sure that I awaken him and take him up high on signatures. The 4-star version I've got at the moment kicks a lot of butt and I'm really impressed, but I really want those champions to be either 5-star and hopefully at a later date 6-star, but we'll see how things happen with champion drops and champion additions in 2019. Unfortunately, as we go into the last part of the year, November and December, Kabam have been seen to be making some more difficult content. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, and I'm not necessarily saying that's a good thing, but the way that this seems to be incredibly monetized does make the community look at the developer in a different light. The difficulty does need to improve for those players that have gone, I've done it, I've completed it, I'm moving on, but at the same time, it's not a case that you can do these things just like a snap. You even need to have the best champions at the highest rank, or you need to have a lot of units to your name in order to get this stuff completed quicker, faster, and more efficiently. This is where Ultron and back issues and Ultron's Assault come in, and at the same time we had the addition of a Champions Clash. This then had an extended difficulty, which did infuriate a lot of players, but at the same time was stuff that people were able to eventually do. Dungeon rewards seemed to improve as well, which was great because we didn't want to go from month to month to month without being able to get something to our name, and the addition of a friend-based system was quite good as well. Unfortunately, in later months this was seen to be an exploit, but it was then sorted out by Kabam, and at the same time people were able to get their hold on a 5-star crystal a lot more quickly. So there were some positives to dungeons, as we've seen from the start point to now the end point. Things have dramatically improved. November saw some other improvements when it comes to profile pics and as well of titles. It wasn't just about being uncollected nowadays, you could get different types of titles by completing Act 1 right the way through to Act 4. So this was good for players of the game to feel that they've got something for their title. Unfortunately, it was just a reduction in the price of premium hero crystals, the ones you buy with units. That was the biggest thing from that. Unfortunately, these aren't things that the community goes to grab quickly. It may be at a very early stage in order to improve your roster, but unit spend in the beginning is all about improving masteries first and anything else secondary to that. December brought us some amazing ways to get more 5-star shards, in particular with the gifting events. If you could work together with Alliance, you were able to get some amazing 5-star shards. The seasonal calendar was brilliant. We also had the standard December calendar, which allowed us to get 5-star shards at the end of it if you've been logging in consecutively each day running to the end of the month. We also saw solo gifting based events. Unfortunately, they ran twice, which did seem a bit of a cash grab from Kabam's perspective, but still there was 5-star shards on offer. It did feel like a good month, but unfortunately the bad is where Dark Hawk is concerned. Right at the very start, Kabam entered in Dark Hawk in the Uncollected and also into the Master, which people weren't too happy about, especially because he had started off with 2 special attacks, and that meant that you lagged at the start of it. That was a big issue, lagging at the start of it, which then meant that you found it difficult to then evade or waiting, and you were just getting hit each time, and you were then getting killed, which was really disappointing. Kabam put some hot fixes and improvements in. Unfortunately, it did feel that this wasn't exactly a solid update and a solid hot fix, with a lot of players still noting that they wouldn't want to complete it this month because of this aggro. But it did mean some positives in that we had the healing, halls of healing, we had the halls of gold or halls of fortune. So there were elements of things that you could take away from that, as well as plenty of gold extra boosts on offer, as well as battle chips. So the 4th year was a good 4th year, and it was a case that they teased Silver Surfer for next year and hopefully Fantastic Four for 2019. 2018 also saw some changes to Mystic Dispersion that some players were not happy about. Some players were happy with it because it affected the way that you put on certain champions on usage for defense. Others would note that the fact that Mystic Dispersion was overpowered to begin with were the core reasons for this being changed. Command felt that this needed to be addressed. Some players still to this day feel really annoyed with the fact and really want rank down tickets to then bring down those Mystic champions that they put up for that purpose. Right, so that has been a special Marvel Contest of Champions news for 2018, focusing on all the major updates and all the major stories that have affected the community. If there's been something in particular from 2018 that has really ruffled your jimmies, or something that has been quite pivotal for the game going into the year and also 2019, then put it in the comments section, as well as what are your hopes for 2019. For me, it's a case that I'd like to see Kabam having more of a transparency aspect. Yes, there is a way that I do feel some transparency for them, but not to a degree where we find out more levels of details. And it's different. I know not a lot of games developers are that open and honest with their community, but at the same time, you have to feel that you have a voice. To use the word community and not feel that your voice, doesn't matter how small you are or how large you are, having a voice is vitally important, and having your say is vitally important as well. Hope Kabam listened to the feedback and decide to improve the game for the better in 2019. But have your say in the comment section about what you feel needs to be improved in 2019, and I'll put it in a future video. Thanks very much for watching. I've been RichTheMan with a croaky voice, hopefully improving soon. I'm over and out. Happy New Year. See you in 2019.